sunset painting. What we're going to do is we are actually going to do a blended background. We're going to start with red up top and blend into like a little soft orange and then go straight into yellow. And then we're going to do our black silhouette tree over top of it. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to use our largest brush. We're going to go ahead and dip it into the red paint, and I'm really loading my brush because I know that I want a good amount of paint on there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to go back and forth. Just nice even motions. I want to make sure that as I go I'm spreading my paint out nice so there's no drips. I want to make sure everything gets covered. The biggest thing about blending is that both colors are wet as you get them to blend. If you try and blend a dry color with a wet color, it's not going to blend. So we want to make sure that both are wet. So that's why you want to make sure that you have a fair amount of paint on the canvas as well. This is just craft acrylic paint, so it dries relatively quickly. So it's going to be important. If for some reason you have to get up and your paint dries and it's right where you want to make that blend, you're going to go ahead and you're just going to add some more of that original color so that it's wet again. And right about here is where I'm going to start thinking about blending my next color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that red, I'm going to add a good amount here, and then I'm going to dip right into my yellow, and I'm going to start down here, and then I'm going to move my way up. And as I go up, I'm not going to be afraid to blend right into my red. What tends to happen, what sometimes I notice people struggle with, is they don't want to keep going back and forth over it. And so it ends up looking kind of like a rainbow where it's a block of color and then a block of color. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you go up into that wet red paint. And when you go up, it just makes a smooth transition. So then I'm just going to keep adding my yellow as I go. And again, I have a really harsh line there, so I want to make sure that I keep going back and forth over it. That's what's going to blend those together. And then right when I get about here, I'm going to make the decision to wash off my brush completely. That's going to get all of the red paint off because now I do want to do just yellow. So I'm going to tap my brush on the bottom of my cup. Squeeze it nice and dry. Don't want any drips. I'm going to go back into my yellow. And now I've got a nice bright yellow. I'm going to simply go over that. Keeping in mind, see how I've got thick lines here? I want to make sure that I go ahead and go over that. I do have a little bit of red in there, so I'm just going to kind of mix that in. I'm going to keep coming down with just this yellow. Now if I've decided that I want to add, so that I have a little bit more orange in there, I can always go back and add just a little bit of red and mix some more down. But you don't have to do that. But now I've got my background painted. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clean out that brush. Now we're going to let this dry. Okay. So when we go to draw this tree, I'm just giving a piece of paper right here just so that I can kind of show you guys exactly what to expect. What I want to do is I want to draw, and this is going to be up to you guys how you draw your tree. But how I'm going to draw my tree is I'm going to want to make it have a curved trunk, kind of like that. So just a curved line. And then we want it to just smoothly start to branch off to different places. And then you're going to curl it like this. And then when you think of trees, they have many branches. So we're just going to branch it like this. And then we can come up here and we can branch it like that and make it even curlier. Make a branch come out here. We can make another branch come out here. But every time we branch, we're going to give it a little curl. And when we give those little curls, that's what's going to give it a fun little detail. But we want our tree to be balanced. If I were to stop like this, it'd be sort of okay. But I kind of want to add a little bit more on this side because we don't want it to be just this little tiny thing. We do want to stay away from our edge a little bit. And then we can even do a spot right about here. Then we're going to balance this tree out by making a little rope that's hanging straight down with a heart at the end. Just like that. And then we're going to end up drawing some thin blades of grass. So this is essentially what we're going to put on our canvas. So what's going to be important is when we go to do these curlicues, we're going to be using this brush, our thin little brush. And so what you might want to try is you might want to try and practice it a couple times. So while you're waiting for your canvas to dry, you can go ahead and you can get a piece of paper even, just for this type of purpose. And you can take your thin brush and you can very softly press down and just come around. Now the key is to only pick it up if you absolutely have to. And if you need to, turn your canvas. But practice with this brush a couple times for this. This part is kind of tricky, so I want you to make sure that you go ahead and you practice. And the other part about this is that you want those bristles together. So again, roll that brush into your paint like this. You roll it into that paint. That's going to stick those bristles together. Make sure you have enough paint on there because that's what's going to take it the best. And then sometimes what I see when I'm teaching people to do this is I see people say, oh, here's a branch, and they stick it out and it kind of looks like a candy cane. So what I want to see instead is I want to see where you start and you follow the tree trunk and then you softly branch out like that. So it's not so much candy cane, it's not super straight, softly branches out. Okay, so that's kind of what we want to see. So, let's see if this is dry. Oh, it's almost dry. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by drawing the tree on here, and then we'll go ahead and do an outline of the tree with our paint. But to start, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on that trunk. So I'm going to decide how curved I want my trunk. And I'm going to just go ahead. I'm not going to sketch it too dark. I'm sketching it a little bit darker for you guys just so that you can see it. But normally I would not sketch it too dark because if I do want to erase, I don't want to give myself a hard time with it. So what I'm going to do is this right here is going to be my main first branch. So I did just a very easy curlicue. So here's my trunk where it's starting. So my trunk is going to be a little bit thicker because the trunk is always thicker when we look at a tree. And my base is going to be wider at the bottom. And then when I come up on this side, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a smaller curlicue right here. Now again, remember, we're not going to go straight out. We're going to take our pencil, we're going to follow that trunk line and simply come out and come around. Then I'm going to go ahead and the other main branch here is going to kind of come up and we're going to do a little curlicue here. And then I'm going to branch out from that one And you can decide how high or what shape. It doesn't have to be exactly like this. This is just kind of how I'm thinking of doing mine. And I don't want all of them to be the same size, so I'm going to go ahead and make them different sizes. And then on this side, what's fun on this one is I like to make kind of like a little heart with the tree where I make one side a little bit taller. And that's going to come back into that main tree trunk. So you can kind of see where that tree trunk stops and the branch comes out. When we get to the point of painting it, you're going to see my paintbrush is going to thicken this area and it's going to naturally make its own kind of V shape there. So we don't need to thicken these. We'll do that with our paintbrush. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some little curly cues kind of around here. Kind of balance it out. And I want to go ahead, I want to make one up here. When I do that, I want to make sure that I'm not just making it straight across here. I want some to come up here, some to go over there. I don't want it to be like a box. So I want it to be balanced but creative. So again, I'm gonna follow that branch and then I'm gonna come right over here. So that's kind of what I've got here. And then after that, I'm gonna look for my heart. My heart, unless you want it swinging in the wind, we want that line to come down nice and straight here. Otherwise it will look like it's a very windy day. So I'm going to go ahead, draw my straight line down, and draw a simple heart at the bottom. Everything else we're just going to go ahead and paint in. So what I'm going to do is I've got everything drawn out. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my smallest brush, my detail brush. I'm going to make sure that because this one, we've got that nice thin line going, I'm going to get it wet. I'm going to form that tip so that it stays together, and then I'm going to roll it to load my paint here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start all the way up here. Now remember, the harder that I press, the wider the line is going to be. So I'm going to barely press down. I can always, always, always press a little bit harder and go in a second try, but it's very hard to take the paint off or to cover it, especially when it's black on a light color. So I want to make sure that I really take my time. Notice I didn't go really quickly there, but I really take my time. And probably the most important part on this tree for me, what I want to accomplish, is I want to make sure that where the branches come out from the trunk, they come out in that natural look. I don't want them to come out straight. I want them to come up and around. Like that. Now you can kind of see, I don't know if you can see, but you can kind of see there's like skip marks. So I want to just go ahead and just go right back over it to make sure that it's fully painted in. But again, you want to really take your time. Don't worry if you don't have a steady hand. You can probably see my hand is shaking too. So don't let that frustrate you. And I'm just going to keep filling in each section as I go. If you do get the black paint somewhere that you don't want, I really want you to consider what you can do to fix it. Most of the time I say just wipe it away, let it dry, and then we'll paint over it. But for this one, it's a little bit trickier to do with that blended background. So I want you to think if it's something where you can just thicken a branch a little bit, like right here, it wasn't very smooth, so I can just go ahead and press a little harder and kind of cover that way. Even though I wasn't intending for it to be that thick, that's okay. So I want you to think about sometimes that's a better way to do things. So you can see lots of skips there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my brush again. And I'm going to go right back over that to get it nice and filled in. There we go. So all of these branches, as we come down closer to the trunk, we're going to want them to get a little bit thicker. So I'm going to press a little bit harder So you can see it went from thinner, which this is a little bit too thin, that branch would just break right off and fall. But we start a little bit thinner and then we go thicker down here. So as you get closer to that trunk, you want that branch to be thicker. As you come out on these little ones, you want them to be thinner. And again, you get to decide how thick or how thin based on how hard you press down on that brush. Never hesitate to turn that canvas just like I did if it's easier for you to get an angle. And then I'm going to fill in that trunk and notice how that trunk is thicker, but still thinner at the top, widens out as we come down to the ground. If you want to get your larger brush to fill in this space, you can. But if you're going to use the small brush like I am, notice I'm not scrubbing it back and forth like that. That will break the brush. Instead, I'm just wiping it down. Like that. You want to make sure that you've got nice smooth lines. That's what's going to make your painting really look nice. I just want to fix this area right up here. There we go. So that's what we've got for our tree. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the rope of the heart. So I'm going to, again, I'm not going to make this line too thick, so I'm barely going to press down. I'm going to find a starting point, and then when I get to my stopping point, I'm simply going to lift up. And then up here, we want it to look a little frayed, so we just kind of make some lines up here. That way it looks like the rope's tied on. And then the last part that we're going to do with our black is we're going to go ahead and make that grass. So I'm again going to reload my brush. And again, I'm not going to scrub, but I'm going to make this motion and just hit my canvas in different directions. And again, when it gets like that, we're going to reload. We're going to know that it's time to get more paint on the brush. The harder that you press, the wider the line, the more paint that you're going to get on there. So you decide how much grass you want down there. So like that. Then we're we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna rinse out that brush again. Make sure it's nice and clean. We don't want any black in there. We're gonna use red to paint in that heart. I'm gonna dry it off. Roll it into the red. Now, when I go to steady my hand, I can steady it on my canvas. However, I don't want to steady it. If you look at the reflection, you can see what's wet. So if I steady my hand on the yellow, no big deal, it's dry. But if I steady my hand on that black, one, I'm going to get a print in there. Two, I'm going to end up forgetting that it's there, and I'm going to print somewhere else on my canvas. So if it's better, turn it like this. And you can go ahead where nothing's wet. I'm not touching the grass, but nothing's wet. And I can just fill in my heart this way. Like that. Just fix the little end. So what you want to do now, because now we've painted everything that we expected, so now what you want to do is you want to check everything out. You want to look if there's anything that you need to change. For instance, I'm looking at it now, so one of the things that I might suggest to myself, or I'm looking at this branch right here, and it's pretty thick up here, and then down here it gets super thin again. That branch would just break right off in the wind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to widen up the base. And that's going to change it just a little bit. Like that. So you can do things like that. So you can look through, same thing here. I can do the same thing. So look through, check it all out, see what else you want to fix, but be aware of where those wet spots are as you're painting so that you don't make a print or lose something that you don't want to lose. Just like that. And then once you're done, you're good to go. Go ahead and clean off those brushes. It's always important to clean up after everything so that you don't ruin the brushes. And then you're good.